Yes, I think the time has come to start. Everybody has found a seat, and I welcome you all for the afternoon session, for the last session of this meeting. Welcome, Frédéric Brenner. So nice that you can come back. I mean, you're coming back quite often, but now with a real mission. And what is interesting is that we talked about two photographers so far where the work started in the archive, and everything they do is grounded in archival work. In Frédéric's case, it is probably the opposite. Frédéric is a photographer who has traveled the world to take photographs, and his work is now ending in a huge archival project, which we will also talk about. So it's in a way inversed. We will not be able to speak about his entire work, even though we will try to span his life and show how he transformed his approach to research and to photography in the course of his life. And we will focus actually on two big projects that he accomplished. One is a work of 25 years of photography. It was called Diaspora, Homelands in Exile, started around late 1970s and was accomplished around 2003. And the other we will talk about is the project that Frédéric started as a fellow at the Wissenschaftskolleg in 2016-17, and it ended in an exhibit at the Jewish Museum here in Berlin in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Will be a very, very small selection, maybe 10, 15 photographs out of the about 100,000 that Frédéric has taken throughout his life. I have mainly chosen the 15, and Frédéric was, of course, not happy and would have liked to see others.
No, because they are for the sake of a conversation, so I accepted that.
Someone had to do the work, I did it, and if you don't like it, complain to me. The questions will be mainly these that have already kept our attention over the meeting. First of all, of course, the question of documentation and art, which is very deep and runs really through Frédéric's work. Another one is one that is particularly dear to Frédéric. If you say research has a core question, you could also say the same about Frédéric's work. His work has a core question, and if you want to simplify it and wrap it up in one question, it would be, what is a Jew? He's not protesting.
No. I have a lot of time to be able to protest.
He answers this question in the most intricate way. He's very skeptical of those identitarian constructions that are simplistic, that are unified. He thinks with Adorno, who says it's a moral obligation to not simplify, and it's a moral obligation not to be at home in yourself. And he also very often quotes Franz Kafka with his famous phrase, what do I have in common with the Jews? I hardly have anything in common with myself. This is very significant, I think. The third axis, I think, that we have to talk about is the question of content and form that comes up in the work. And we'll try to do it in the manner of historic writing, starting from the beginning, and looking at images a bit from the context and horizon in which they were taken, and not so much from a perspective of today, even though that could also be interesting. And I hope that will take us through the series, and it will provide surprises. Françoise Sagan once famously said, "On ne sait pas ce que le passé nous réserve." We never know what past has in store for us, and that is exactly what we're hoping for. Frédéric, so good that you are with us and that you're sharing a life of photographer with us.
Thank you, Daniel. In fact, we live very close to each other, about 300 meters on the other side of a square, and this conversation is just the continuation of a conversation that I've had the privilege to have with Daniel I want to thank Daniel. I wouldn't be here today if it was not for Daniel. I wouldn't have come to the Wissenschaftskolleg. I came to Vico and I spoke to him because I was not convinced that this was a place for me. I used to say, I'm a free electron, I have my own projects, what will I do in Germany? And eventually Daniel convinced me, just come here. And Vico, I'm eternally grateful to Vico because it offered me the space and the time to do something that I had not done before. And my only other example of residency was at the Villa Medici, the French Academy in Rome. And I thought nothing can beat, Villa Medici and the weather and all that. And in fact, Vico was at the very least at the same level than the French Academy. And the kindness of people, and we were an incredible group that year. And so I was able to find the space and the time to do something that I would say this is maybe my most intimate project. I've been longing for this intimacy with my photographic practice, but with myself. And I would say from the very beginning, it was clear to me that my journey was a journey of restitution to what was unspoken in my family, what was buried, what was dissimulated. And I was longing for that. And I would speak of it, but it's only in Berlin that I was able to reclaim this intimacy.
Let us start exactly and some beginnings. Yesharim is the Orthodox quarter of Jerusalem, as many of you know, and this is one of the very first photos that Frédéric took and that were published later in a volume that is called Jérusalem Instant d'Éternité. You are born and raised in Paris. You were about 18 or maybe 19 years old.
18 years.
18 years old when you took this photograph. What attracted you to Mea Sharim, and how did this photo came about?
I went to Jerusalem for the first time, and I come from a family where there was basically no transmission, nothing. And for me, it was maybe as an extreme person, a way to try to understand where I come from, what is this. So I went to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And instead of traveling as I thought I would travel, I spent a lot of time in this neighborhood, mm-hmm. which in fact has nothing to do with Jerusalem. It's a recreation of a shtetl in the heart of Jerusalem. People live in Diaspora, in the heart of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And so I took this photograph, or this photograph took me. I always say that this journey undertook me much more than that I undertook it. It's all what was unspoken, at home, dissimulated, that brought me to have this, to undertake this corps à corps with mm-hmm. my own history.
And you just came out of school. Who put the camera in your hand?
I went to, my father thought, oh, why wouldn't you go to the International Meeting of Photography in Arles? And so I went to Arles, and I followed 2 workshops, mm-hmm. And then I went to Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at that image, what is really at the center is a Hasidic Jew in the costume that characterizes him. And you say the context is that of a rebuilt shtetl, a very culturally defined space. I put together some of the things you say of a childhood and upbringing in which Judaism was somehow present, but at the same time not present. It was a puzzle for you, it was a question for you, and it looks almost to me as if this attraction that you had for exactly this place and the impetus to take photos there had to do with this background. And it seems almost as if you went to a place where you could find an answer to this question of your upbringing and where you could find something emblematic, like a quintessence of what you were not really understanding. Is that...
Yes, again, as I say, I was raised in a very, a family who survived both my parents, the Shoah, and so my grandparents already decided to embrace French secular and republican values. My grandfather was a communist and militant, and so there was nothing, less than nothing, which was being passed on. And my parents woke up very late when I was about 12 and started to be concerned by transmitting something. But nothing was transmitted. I went during the last 3 years of my, before baccalaureate, to a Jewish day school, and this is where, this is what I got, and then I needed to push the door that had been slightly open for me. And so I went to the most emblematic neighborhood where people really look like Jews. And then it took me 40 years to deconstruct this image.
That is the later journey. And you held this camera, but you weren't trained to use it. So this photo is an intuitive production, maybe has some serendipitous elements. I mean, you were familiarizing yourself with the machinery, and I think it's the beginning of a learning process that was not through formal training, but autodidactic,
yes,
and very much conceptually driven. How would you describe this learning process? How did you become a photographer?
I am really an autodidact. I was very lucky to meet in the early, at the very beginning of my work, a man by the name of Pierre Gassman, who was running the biggest lab in Paris, came from Breslau, opened a lab for Magnum, and I was lucky that he looked at some of my photographs, and I shared his office for 30 years. And so in the lab, everybody was coming, from Jacques-Henri Lartigue to Cartier-Bresson, to everybody, to Douaneau and to Kertész. And so I was lucky because I saw a lot of photographs, and when I would come back from some trips, Pierre would just help me choose the photographs. So this is how, and I started to go, I studied social anthropology, but at the beginning, my father said, oh, it may be a school of photography, and there were no school of photography in 1980 in Paris. There was, yes, Rue de Vaugirard, but it was not, it was mainly for technique. It was not a school for photography, like in America.
You said that the main thing beyond the technicalities of this was to learning how to see.
Yes.
How would you describe this learning?
I learned the craft while photographing. Machado says, "Se hace el camino al andar," is by walking that you make your path. So this is how, and I was lucky to have several major photographers who could look at the photograph, and but this is how yes, I'm an autodidact.
And you also like this quote by Didier Huberman, who says, it is only when we learn to look at things in a way that they look back at us,
yes,
that we really see.
Yes.
I
believe things look at us all the time.
Now, in that image, there's not only the Hasid, there's also this little angel figure, which, of course, places this photograph in the context of Purim, the festival of celebration, of disguise, also of inversion. And somehow the photo, as the angel is in the foreground and gives it an almost unreal it strikes me as an important part of the overall construction of this image. Would you say that the Purim leitmotif that comes back a lot in your work later, already informs of how we should look at this photo?
I don't know. I mean, what I see, I know that you like this photograph, and you like the idea of Purim. And I told you, Daniel, you really want that we speak about that. But I would say here, of course, very inspired of the famous decisive moment that Cartier-Bresson coined, and this was all the ethnographic part of this project has been inspired by those photographs that I saw. You know, I had lunch with those people regularly when I was in Paris. But yes, there's a kind of choreography. This is the choreography and the theater, which is really the red thread that will pull me during 50 years.
This is what I thought, that of course you were looking, as you said, for an emblematic Jew, to finally understand what a Jew is. But at the same time, with this little girl in disguise and the whole Purim context around it, I mean, it made me think that there was also already a second level there. And if the girl is disguised, maybe the Chassid is also disguised, and that we're looking, as you say, at a theater play. But I just say what I see. It's not in any way an authoritative interpretation.
It's an open text.
It's
so
an open
this
text.
is
Exactly. Let us maybe move on, because we have some decades to cover. And the next the next slide is actually a slide that can indicate how things moved on from there. Because if the beginning was the search for, let's say, an emblematic expression of what a Jew was, then Frédéric completely changed his methods. And he actually, and I hope you can at least see some spots on that world map, he traveled the entire globe. And it's almost 50 years now that you do this, and there's not a continent that Frédéric has not traveled to, and so many countries have become sites of his work. And this is, of course, in many ways significant, because it means that Frédéric started to look for Jewish culture, Jewish life in so many different contexts where exactly they were not emblematic. And this is something we should, I think, look into as a second example. Not so long after the first photo that we looked at, this is a picture taken in northern Ethiopia in the Shawada Mountains, and we see a group of Jewish women in this photo. Is there even a way of seeing that these women, I mean, are there any markers of Jewishness in this photo?
In this very specific photo, there's no markers except that there's some embroideries on their dress with a menorah, and sometimes they have a star. We don't see them here in this specific photograph, but there are several other photographs which are, in a way, justify the fact that I went there, because the fact that this group lived in such isolation enabled them to keep pre-Talmudic practices, which disappeared from the rest of any group which existed in diaspora. So for this very reason, I wanted to go there.
And it is also a phase in which, as you've already mentioned, you start to study ethnography. And I think your early work is very much shaped by the research practices of ethnography, and until today, you do field work very much as part of your photographic practice. So the tension, let's say, or the mutual fertilization between research and art is clearly there in your case.
Yeah, and I needed to acquire the tools to decipher the groups and which key opened which door, to try to address the right questions about the people that I was about to photograph. But the first incentive was to save from oblivion groups that had been living for 2,000 years in different lands and which were about to disappear. They had already disappeared. The sample of population that I was dealing with was very reduced. But so it's also a work of reconstitution. I could photograph this practice and these professions and that, but the groups were extremely reduced, whether it was in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Yemen, everywhere I went. So the first incentive was really to save from oblivion those practices.
Yes, if you want to understand how Frédéric was trained and what informed this kind of approach, I think one of the references that you could turn to is Robert Jolin, which back in the time was a prominent French ethnographer and one of your teachers. And you could understand him as an early French postmodern ethnographer, because as you said, he would see the forces of universal Western civilization as destructive forces that were eating up and destroying cultures all around the world. And in a way, ethnography by Jolin and then by you was defined as a way of saving, of maintaining, or at least documenting cultures that were threatened to disappear. Now, in a way, this must have been a huge opening for you, but at the same time, starting from your most inner question, who am I and what is a Jew, maybe also a bit of confusion. When you were interacting with these women and when you were, and the Jewish culture in Africa, and when you were observing them, was it more that you were recognizing a part of yourself in them, a shared Jewishness? Or would you rather say that there was also a large degree of strangeness and otherness? So what was stronger in the relation towards these new cultures that you were discovering?
First of all, whenever I was traveling and I photographed, I never thought that I was photographing somebody else. And slowly, I understand that each of those groups enabled me to express something that I had to deal with, a part of myself. And at a very early stage, I described my project as a puzzle that I was piecing together. And then slowly, this puzzle became my puzzle, my own puzzle that I was trying to piece together. And I would say toward the end of the ethnographic period, and we'll see that later, it became clear that it was my puzzle. So from this outer journey, it became an inner journey. It was an inner journey from the beginning, because I myself spoke of it as a journey of restitution.
Let us look at another version of the same portrait. In this, I mean, it's the same woman. I think it's not exactly the same side. And the second one did not make it in the final series. It's the first one that was actually selected to be part of the final series. Looking at the two in comparison, is there already an early form of, let's say, artistic staging visible in this? Because, I mean, if you look back, the formation here is, I just intuitively say it's more attractive, it's more interesting, the relations are more interesting. This is more formal and looks as if, maybe have you told them to stand in a line, or were you a documenting ethnographic photographer that was just clicking the camera to show what was?
As I said, as you suggested, yes, I was trying to test how could I photograph these people. And of course, the good photograph is the one which comes before, where I didn't do anything. And here maybe my ethnographic practice said, let's try to have them. And I believe this was my first choice for many years, until I decided I needed to make a selection for the book. And this is the other one which came first. So I was starting to deal with wrestling with the form, content and form. And this wrestling became more and more with And it's very interesting because I would say the conversation from yesterday evening to today has been fascinating for me. And one this morning, I think you say, can I do that? Mm-hmm. Can I allow myself to do that? And this is what I've asked myself on and on. Here I was saying, can I allow myself to do this photograph like that? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, maybe we can...
we have to talk more about it, but it seems that the amount of staging or of artistic intervention is very low because you're still in that, more in that vein of documentation. This is also shown by the fact that Frédéric often followed the people he portrayed over many years, and the same Ethiopian women, he found them again more than a decade later after their migration to Israel, where there's, as you know, a huge Ethiopian Jewish community.
And this was part of another project. So my project Diaspora is called Diaspora, Homelands in Exile. And the book that I decided to publish in Israel in '96 was called Exile at Home. So basically this longing and belonging and this wrestling between what is home, what is exile. And I traced 15 families who had immigrated from Yemen, from Charleston, South Carolina, from Rome to Israel. And so those are exactly the same persons that are on the previous photographs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we move on to a completely different context, but somehow similar. Well, these are other photos from, let's look at this briefly, but not talk about it because we want to move on.
That's in Yemen?
Yemen, same time.
This is an important photograph. I wanted Daniel to show it, but we say we'll pass quickly. I mean, how diaspora for me really play as a metaphor for fertilizing. How Jews have been fertilized and how they are fertilized in return. You know, from Egypt to America via Spain, via Germany. And so is the dress made for the architecture or the architecture for the dress? And this is at the border of Saudi Arabia in northern Yemen.
This is
one of Daniel's favorite photographs.
I do not deny it. And it's an interesting photograph also in the context of the questions that we're looking at, because it is still in that context where we think and work ethnographically. Again, we have a portrait here of a Jewish woman where Jewishness as such is in no way visible. Maybe you say a little bit about where we are. What is this little Jerusalem in southwestern Russia?
We are in Ilyinka, in a place called Voronezh Oblast, which is a region not far from in the region of Voronezh. This is in fact the very place where Natan Sharansky, the refusenik, was arrested and went to Siberia. And in fact, those are Russian Orthodox who were Judaizing within the Orthodox Church and converted to Judaism in the medieval period. An incredible story, and we find them in three places. Here in the Caucasus and somewhere in Russia. And I went, it was a restricted area, so I went there. Of course, all the permissions you needed to get, it was, I started to negotiate with the authorities in 1986. I went to former Soviet Union under Andropov. So the hard line, you know, of Andropov and that. And then I started to negotiate with the authorities to get permission to travel all around former Soviet Union. And I was one of the first Western photographers to be granted the permission to travel everywhere. And I had got a taste because I went to Central Asia and the Caucasus earlier in the early 82, 83. And I saw this incredible ethnical and cultural diversity within the Soviet Union. And the Jews were spread in the 14 of the 15 republics. And we had such a monolithic perception of what was Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to show within Soviet Union the incredible spectrum of diversity. And so I ended up also in this place. And for me, this capacity to take the shape and the color of the place where you are is very much what Jews have done throughout their immersion among the nations and that. And this is, we are in a kolkhoz, and she was here with other women peeling beetroots, and I decided to make a portrait of her. I mean, she's the typical kolkhozian, and for me, this project is as much about Soviet Union as it is about Jews. It is as much Jews are revealed by the place where they are and how they reveal the place where they are. Again, this metaphor for fertilizing and...
Yes, and you explained to me how portraits like this and ethnographic portraits that are so much an expression of what you've described, of assimilation and of fading in.
Yes.
With that these were actually the situations that slowly, by and by, pushed you to use more elements of staging, more elements of construction, because you, I think, after a decade or so, started to not be frustrated, but to feel the shortcomings of a purely ethnographic photography. And this is, I think, when you started to move into more artistic forms. And we'll look at two examples from a similar context, where this slow shift from mostly documentary photography to a more constructed and more artistic photography can maybe be understood.
Yeah, and again, when the visual signifier start to disappear, then I need to find a way to show that identity. What a terrible word. You know, identity is this in-between. This is what I've been born to through this journey. But maybe we'll look at the...
Yeah.
Basically, Alexei Polonsky was working in a metallurgic factory, and I spent a lot of time there. I went back and forth, and I told and then I saw, you know, I photographed him working and that, and then, as you say this morning, can I allow myself to take him and put him on this huge press? And I did it. And of course, this is, I would say, the first photograph that I did stage, because I dared to take him and to put him here.
Wonderful. And I think looking at the time that is running, we should really move into a second phase in which the staging that starts very timidly and carefully here moves to an entire new level.
But we spend 1 minute to the next one, if you don't mind. So here, no, because this is, again, I learned a lot by having 3 or 4 conversations with Daniel to try to see how we would, how could this conversation take place. I was sure that in this photograph, which describes a family and the portrait of their son who passed away, who died in a car accident, he's on the wall at the very end. And I was sure, I keep speaking of this photograph as a photograph where you see a crack appearing in the wall. And I believe in my own lies because, again, there's no crack in the wall. And I really looked, because when I choose it, I tell Daniel, oh, this is important because this is when I start looking at the cracks within. This is the very first moment where I shift from outer journey to inner journey. And from this puzzle to my own puzzle.
Mm-hmm. But as you will see, this is only a beginning of a process of a very different kind of photography that will finally take you away from ethnographic documentation entirely. And if we shift now to this photo, you will understand what I mean. This was taken in Rome, exactly in during the residency that you talked about in 1992. And you can see that these kind of portraits are very different from what you did before. Can you say what triggered?
Yeah, I mean, what triggered it was simply the big challenge of this photographic journey was to reinvent at each step of my journey a form at the measure of what I consider was at stake in this very place. And so the photograph I do, each photograph is an equation. So I try to photograph like I did before. Mm-hmm. My attempt to photograph the little man on the press was one of the very first attempt. And here I started to photograph families, and I saw it didn't work. And Rome was so powerful. Rome is not a city, it's an image. Rome is prisoner of all its representations. And so I thought, what could I do? And I basically took those people who are ricordari, the souvenir sellers, on Via Imperiale and in the Coliseum. And I put them in the Coliseum, where we know that the bravest of the Hebrews who were deported to Rome had to fight as gladiators. So this is how this photograph came to be. Can I allow myself to do that? This is again what I know. This is what what I did.
Stephen Greenblatt said about this photo that he interprets it as a late victory, as an overcoming of previous states of slavery, and that these gladiators are not slaves that have been forced to fight in the Colosseum, but they are in a somehow triumphant pose. Is it a late victory?
Yes, I think it's a late victory. I mean, until the creation of the State of Israel, Jews were not allowed to go under the Arch of Titus, and this is a photograph about its sort of cast is the Arch of Titus, one of the bas-reliefs. Opposite of that, on the other side, you have Vespasien, who enters in Rome on his chariot, and but those are basically the Hebrews who are entering Rome with the
spoils of war.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So this would be the contradiction between this defeat against Titus and maybe a reversal in the photo. Let's move to another photo a few years later, where you stage, and the staging has taken even bigger.
Yeah, and it's interesting this morning also, panoramic. So
yes.
I started to use panoramic in the former Soviet Union, and I use it horizontal, vertical, and I like the narrative structure that it enables. And so the photograph become big production. I was when I started my project in America, I read Baudrillard. Il n'y a pas d'Amérique, il n'y a qu'un spectacle de l'Amérique. There's not such a thing as America, but only a spectacle of America. And it was an important book, and I looked at it. I read it, and in fact, I did what Americans are doing, staging them. This performance, this entertainment developed on such level. And this was Las Vegas, so, of course, all the problems. It took months to convince the director of the new built hotel to allow me to use this set for having the Hebrew Academy of Las Vegas set here in yes, it become big production. So I start creating those tableaux vivants.
And you're, in a way, coming back to the Baudrillard quote, you push the spectacle to such a level that it somehow unveils or reveals itself as a spectacle. So you're inciting the people you portray to take poses that go far beyond what is usual as a self
in a way, épreuve des masques, épreuve de vérité. So you have this.
Again, it's a late victory to have the Sphinx, the looking up desperately in the sky. I think it could also be seen as a late victory. there are other photos from the photos from the US are exuberant and wild and crazy, and this is the society of psychiatrists.
14 of the most famous New York psychoanalysts in the Holy of the Freudians. And I originally wanted to stage this photograph on Park Avenue with each one holding a balloon with the effigy of Freud, with a cigar and that. But just to convince 14 of those people to participate was in itself a huge challenge. But
and it's wonderful how the couch pushes them all to one side of the room.
And you can see Freud the father everywhere, of course. And
yes, we could look at a lot of those, and the volumes are here to go through. But in order to continue along this lifelong journey, we now have to move on and move into yet another phase, yet another approach to photography. The questions remain always the same, but the way how you do it has completely changed. And now we are in the year of your fellowship, and you have to imagine that Frédéric arrives here. In the beginning he was grumpy, he didn't want to be here, his father had told him not to come to Germany, and he talked about this, and then we had invited this famous photographer, and all he was doing was wander around in the streets here, taking photos of fallen leaves. And you must imagine that this is a very, very dangerous thing to do, because in Grunewald, as you know, people drive around in these huge SUVs, and the likelihood to be hit by a car while taking these photographs is very big. And Frédéric, when I warned him and I said, we cannot lose a fellow, you have to be more careful, he said, a photographer who is not ready to die for a picture is not a good one. Now, why these photos? Why these leaves?
I must say I really surprised myself by photographing leaves. I only photograph, I'm a people person, I photograph people, I make portraits. I mean, you've seen the photograph. And I came here and the first cup of tea that I drank, there was those little stickers about it, and on it was written, "Lasse die Dinge zu dir kommen." And I say, you know, I wrote that earlier today, I say that I have been longing for this intimacy. I've been longing for getting rid of this mastering, of my mind hyperventilating, and I've been longing again beyond mastering. After I understood, I couldn't go any further, or I would just be internalized. So I had no other choice but to surrender. Surrendering is something that I've been contemplating for many years, and only here at the Wissenschaftskolleg, as I said, very grateful for the space and the time that I was given. I realized that, you know, I mean, those photographs took me. I didn't take these photographs. This is a portrait of my inner self. It's also maybe those leaves are also the ashes of the family, of my family. Things were unspoken, buried, dissimulated, all of that. And I became, as the people that I decided to photograph then in Berlin, I became the archaeologist of my own history. And so did many people. Carrie Harrison, that we'll see, may his memory be blessed, also came here. He waited 70 years to deal with the history of his family that he had not dealt with before. So in this way, this was very important. So I was not talking anymore of surrendering. I was able to surrender. And the leaves led me to the other part. So I made 4,000 photographs of leaves. I thought I would make a book about leaves. And
yeah, we were a bit worried. We had invited this famous French photographer, and all he was doing was taking photos of leaves. But he also did another thing that was later proving as very important. He did field work. He really explored Jewish life in Berlin, talking to, I mean, many, many people. In the beginning, I thought I could introduce him to a few people. In the end, it was him introducing me to people. So he really explored the scene. And he did, during his fellowship, only one portrait, which is this one. It is the portrait of another fellow. It was taken in the courtyard of Villa Walter, actually the place that you all know. Frédéric was standing on these balconies, and he was looking down on Carrie, who had himself decided to be portrayed in this way.
Yeah, it's a long journey because I tried, again, I think with the leave, I had really been able to surrender. But while I went, I used to go to swim with Carrie, which is how I discovered his tattoo. And then I said, I need absolutely to make a photograph. But to make a photograph, not of a tattoo, but a tattoo in situation, on a body with something. And first I took Carrie at Gleis-Epsin, just around where I used to go almost every other day to go to the Revé. And then, so this was the photo, I mean, this is when he's moving, but I had a photograph with him there. And we spoke a lot about it, and I thought he wanted to have a train rail and that, so we did it. And I was not, obviously, that was not the ultimate surrendering. They said, Frédéric, I want to be photographed with me embracing the German soil. And one morning, so we decided, soil, let's take the one, I lived on the 4th floor, he lived on the 2nd floor of Villa Walter, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't do anything. Carrie took exactly, if we can go back, the pose that you see here. I didn't do anything. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Julia's husband was coming out with his bicycle to, like every morning. He was coming out. I have a fantastic photograph of him coming out. And he saw a person, and I have a photograph where exactly what he saw after. And when I saw, and I was able only to make 6 photographs. When I say the photograph took me, it is all the more true because my assistant, who had been visiting from Israel 2 months before, because I didn't make any photograph in Berlin. I scouted, I prepared what I was going to do, had put the camera on the delay mode. So I was pushing on the button, and he didn't press until the click. So it took me like 3 or 4 photographs to understand, no, my camera doesn't work. And then, so I have, let's say, 7 photographs of it. And this is one of the 7. When I tried to read, because, and I understood I had never made a photograph like that before. And I say, I need to stay in Berlin and to continue. If I can make a photograph like that, or if I can surrender and trust serendipity, trust the energy, trust that what the person, I always used to say that a photograph is a journey. I want to take the person to a certain place, but the place where he will take me in return is a much better place than the one where I will take him or her. And I tried to make this photograph 3 weeks later because it was so perfect. And of course, there's those little details that make that it was impossible. So this is the photograph of Carrie. And yes, and this is, and I would say for me, when I see this photograph and the photograph of the angel, this is a big arc, and I can put them next to each other. Yes, and they speak with each other.
And in a way, I mean, this is a very multi-layered image. You said it's Carrie embracing the German soil. There's a bit of a Jesus-like figure in there, and death plays a huge role. The angel, the angelic nature of this picture. So while surrendering, there's
the fallen angel.
You create. So the earlier ones that we looked at, they created surprise and a laugh because you immediately understand that there's a pun involved. And this is a photo of people. I have it in my office. This is why I know. When people see it, they take a step back. They're puzzled. They don't know what's actually what it's all about, and it's a huge enigma. And I think the surrendering comes maybe, and this characterizes the entire series, with the desire to make photos that don't make sense.
Yes.
That dissolve sense.
Again, to what I learned this morning and yesterday, again, this entire project is about to disrupt narratives and to question. Through this journey, I was born to paradox, ambivalence, dissonance, and questions. And I would say, the angel is in disguise. Everybody is dressed. He is naked. So this is, again, back to, intimacy.
Yeah, and people are puzzled. Here we see a puzzled spectator. And what does the lady do? She Googles to find out what the tattoo on the back actually is. She tries to find the reference. It's not difficult to find. It is the beginning phrases of Minima Moralia of Adorno. And that has to do with the fact that Carrie is the son of Rex Harrison and grew up in New York. One of the rare books that this Jewish exile family had in their shelves that had this German reference was Minima Moralia. And of course, it is a reflection on the situation of exile. So it is very much related with his life's quest. So this is maybe the least enigmatic part of this photo is the tattoo. It's almost...
But even when we don't know what is the tattoo, what does it say? Already, and it's very, for me, when I am tempted to tell people, on top of that, what is the text about, and that because I don't know. And now I wanted before this photograph, it was like 8 months in the incubator. His daughter had, the daughter of Carrie, had also a tattoo in the back, which is the blueprint of the Pantheon, and the plan of the Pantheon in Rome, and I thought, how would I make that? So in a way, the fact that it came to such a simple expression, just by accepting just to follow him.
Well, if you don't know that it's Minima Moralia, you would probably think that it's the wings of the angel that are on the back. I think we should slowly come to an end and speak about this last project that you're fully involved in and that is not accomplished. And you said National Library has invited you, this is the new building in Tel Aviv, has invited you to, in Jerusalem, to depose your legacy there, these about 100,000 pictures that you've taken, and there's an ongoing digitalization project that we'll speak about in a minute. It's somehow ironic that you once decided to bring these photos there for them to be safe. We know that the situation is not safe. It's also ironic that your work that is all about dissolving identity, about questioning identity, arrives in Israel at the moment where identity is so strongly charged and so hardened and so unified. But you could also say that the message of your work at the moment in Israel is ever more necessary and ever more important.
I would say that I accepted this invitation, and almost, simultaneously I met with the director of the department, the Pluridisciplinary Lab of Data Visualization, where you have about 15 people, from social anthropologists to engineers to philosophers to interface designers. And because it seemed to me for the last 4 or 5 years, the relevancy of such photographic harvest, given the erosion and the erasure of otherness everywhere, is so important. And this photographic harvest is about diversity, but it's about multiplicity, and it's about acknowledging multiplicity within. We are a multitude. In the early 90s, I discovered Pessoa, and I discovered Pessoa, who 100 years ago coined the term heteronyms. He was writing under 52. He had 52 person in him. He says somewhere, each of us is an overflow of self. In the outstretched colony of our being, all kind of people feel and think in various ways. And this is absolutely how I have felt, and this is how I was able to photograph each of these groups, which were a part of myself. So this puzzle is really my own puzzle. Also because originally my grandparents came from Algeria on my mother's side, came from Ukraine and Romania on my father's side. So I've been retrieving all those threads which weave who I am. I've been retrieving all those voices who have been unspoken voices and that. And so when the idea this morning, the big word was yesterday, research. So I feel extremely privileged to have been able to create this photographic harvest, then to be able to revisit, to research. It was already a research, but now it's a research on this journey. I'm like un petit pousset, comme on dit, un petit pousset.
I don't know.
You leave the stones behind you, and I'm both an archaeologist, I'm both re-experiencing and seeing how the dots have been connecting me and revisiting this journey. So we are basically now this pluridisciplinary lab is going to stage to transform this photographic harvest into a relevant archive. I don't like the word archive. I think when we say archive, we see something very dusty, very... So I will just read, because I ask the lab to express in few lines what they are exactly doing. And then we'll see it's a film of
3 minutes.
3 minutes, 3 prototypes of this. So all the photographs, the 100,000 plus photographs, were digitized. They have been indexed. So we spent a year with a team of 7 people. I basically wrote every single title and description with one person. So it was a kind of conversation. And then we have keyword each photograph, and they have started to stage this. And of course, they are one of the leading labs in digital humanities, and the kind of rapprochement that can be made are incredible. And I'm discovering things that I couldn't discover by myself. And so what they write is, this is a research project titled Granularity of Dispersion and Materiality, which is developing and studying interactive visualization strategies that expose the processual, relational, and material dimensions of digitized photo archives. Frédéric Photo Collection on the Jewish Diaspora is the case study for this research. The project is carried out of the UC Lab of University of Applied Science in Potsdam. So the first thing we'll see is the animated journey map.
Can I start?
Yes,
or?
you can start.
It will take a while to... It should be playing now. Yeah.
This dynamic map timeline interface plays an auto-scrolling animation of Frédéric's mission, drawing lines and proportionally sized circles to show where and when he photographed, while letting viewer pause, scrub the timeline, and hover to see image previews and cross-highlight locations.
Basically, how to navigate, there are different ways to navigate the database. And this is a spatially and temporally informed one.
And this is just the prototype. So the project has been 2.5 years in the making, and there's 2 more years. So now we are in the stereoscopic journals. A split-screen reader synchronizes diary passages, there are 60, with the matching photo stream, so scrolling either side reveals semantically linked text image pairs. The rich metadata acts as filters, letting viewers follow a person, place, or theme through the narrative. and this is in fact a young Italian student who made her master on these diaries. So there are about 60 diaries from 45 countries.
The diaries could also be...
Yeah, my diaries, sorry.
The diaries can also be described as field notes. I mean, they're very much the result of that involvement with the different spaces that you visited.
I love when they collapse the photographs when there's a... So we are now in the monadic wall. Starting from any chosen photograph, a lateral wall unfolds rows of images ranked by shared year, place, or keywords, gradually drifting from close similarity to looser affinities. Clicking a new image recenters the wall and leaves a breadcrumb trail for backtracking exploration. And what I like, of course, there's the poetic dimension of this, that the visitor can interact with. And this is the storytelling interface. So they created a special software. I don't like the word storytelling, but because it's more inviting people to connect dots and be connected by dots. Curated essays or audio narrations with photographs, diary excerpts, maps, and glossary entries into guided archive-anchored stories that offer more structure and orientation while anchoring all what is shown deeply in the archive, allowing the free-form exploration at any time.
Yes, very interesting approach to database navigation. We can also discuss this. I'm afraid this is all we can say here on the podium. We have prepared for 3 hours of conversation. We only had one, but I hope some of the interesting points have been raised, and we want to leave some time, at least 20 minutes also, for your questions. First of all, of course, thank you, Frédéric.